We have a Buddhist monk in the chat or in the Discord. Welcome. Shout out to you.
Yeah,
What's up, Bante?
yeah, mostly to fix the problem with the people, you have to detach from them because you may think that you can reason with them or that the reasoning or explanation will work, but actually there's no way to explain the mind. There's no way to explain the reality of the situation going on. So the more that you can detach, the more that you're sharing the solution or the answer to the problem.
I agree. That's been my experience in my life as well, also.
Yep. If,
Sometimes, sometimes you can do certain things, but the more that you have the detachment power, the more skillful it will be.
Well, I was just talking more about being able to just have a discussion and air out your differences and actually get to the bottom of what each other is thinking. You don't have to try to change anybody. But if you
Well,
think
you have to
secretly
see
that
your
somebody might be
intention.
going through something, you could just talk to them and find out for yourself rather than sitting from a distance and coming to your own conclusions.
Have you seen the post that Bentino's team have posted on their YouTube comments?
I saw somebody post in the comment
If you
section
go
about
onto
that. Yeah.
actual Bentino's YouTube channel, their team have literally responded in a comment directly to one of the comments, and it's literally what I posted in the YouTube section of the Discord. It's literally that exact statement. And then there's a back and forth between Bentino's legitimate team and Miriam. And if you just look at that, like I said when we first had the initial conversation, like I said, I've got nothing against Miriam, and I wish her all the best. But if you look at that, it's hard for me to to
yes.
look at this as not being what's the situation is. What the situation is. She is having some delusions, and that's
Yes. We don't want to go much more into that. That's topic for another video. If anybody here
I had a
is,
oh,
question
we're
for
live.
yes.
Okay.
I had a question for Varapanyo. I was wondering, do you think sometimes it's good to attach to, for example, like a mantra, like you can kind of be attached to that, or maybe to like good things, or or if you detach from those things and you can you go even further?
Well, you should
What do
be open to the understanding. You should be open to the understanding that unless you're enlightened, which is a really vague term actually, but um, like what Sadhguru will talk about, you're ecstatic, you're blissful, you're engaged, you're dynamic, you're healthy and wealthy in the body and mind. Unless that's going on, you're psychotic. You can't control your mind. You don't have direct access to deeper states of mental profundity. You're just clawing at things to get by. So, we put these other people into boxes when they're having a difficult experience, but really, who are you? And how much control do you have over your mind and your life? It's extremely limited. So the when we look at the people in the lower situations, it's very easy to feed our pride, right? But actually we're not much in a higher situation anyway. So we can just kind of be, know how to let go. Because that idea of trying to understand trying to talk to each other, trying to understand each other, that's just never ending. That will never, never end. It just goes on and on and on. So you have to look closely at what your intention is in terms of engagement. Is it based in selfishness or is it based in generosity? And most of the time, it's going to be selfishness. Yeah. So the question about attaching to something to facilitate detachment is very good. That's why we attach to generosity, or that's why we attach to the spiritual teacher, as far as we can know, because then we can detach from ourselves in that. So it's like a workable model.
Thank you for that. Anybody else here after the live stream have any questions? Have any questions at all? All right. Yes, Bante Virapano has a Discord of his own. He has a YouTube channel. Maybe you can click on his profile and you can find that.
There's a big energy crew coming around tonight. When they look at all these people in there, I was like, what is going on here? There's like 19, 20 people, loads of people just synchronized joined as well. Seems like there's energy going on. I like it.
Bante, I was wondering, what do you think it is that you detach from, and what do you think it is that you attach to, like in its essence, if you could philosophize?
It's just like you're running around and around in a circle like a crazy person all the time. That's basically what's going on. And you go from that to stopping enough to start practicing sadhana and start moving towards the direction of a spiritual teacher or a spiritual lifestyle. You know, that's a bit sad, but another way you can go about it is you can focus more on generosity and helping others. You know, and then you also won't be running around because the selfishness in our own mind means that you're just like you're on a merry-go-round of grasping in your own mind all the time. That's the running around doing nonsense all the time. But if you focus on helping others, then you immediately kind of get outside of that. You're still spinning and spinning around, but at least you're going towards letting go because you're not just fixated on this body and mind. So you just have to comes in when you're not being honest about how serious you are about this matter. Because if you're really, really serious about this matter of spiritual life, it means you have to give up a lot and you have to try to find a teacher. Just like if you were serious about MMA, you know, don't make yourself into more of a fool than you already are. If you're really, really serious about MMA, you have to go to join a gym and you have to go to find the best MMA instructor that you can. You have to follow them as closely as you can to develop yourself. You have to give your life to that. Otherwise, you have no place in the ring, you know, and then it's more, you should focus on being a donor, being a supporter, things like that. Helping people who are in the ring to promote them, to facilitate their training, to, inspire, make them feel supported to keep getting in the ring.
Bante, do you think there's space for the world of entertainment to merge with this at the same time, though?
That's Sadhguru. I mean, that's as close as you're going to get to that is Sadhguru. And really, it's not Sadhguru, it's the people who support him. Because that's the work of stopping. You know, that's the work of ending the grasping and the chasing and the seeking. So a spiritual teacher is never really going to be skillful at getting people addicted to anything. That's the power of a spiritual teacher, a real teacher.
But don't you want to be addicted to like the mantra or the teacher or?
Oh, that will just be psychosis.
Mantra and things like that. It's more like a tool to get you away from what you always thought you were. That process, that mental back and forth that you think you are. That's what you're detaching. That's what you're looking to
The
detach from,
first,
really.
the first thing that you need is the willingness to be generous and to sacrifice. So you have to practice and exercise that. If you can do that, then you will see how important it is to be careful and be mindful over your moment by moment conduct, mentally, physically, verbally. And you'll see that you don't really know what to do. So you'll try to find a system or a set of values that empower you to regulate the mind all the time. And then that's when cultivation comes in. And that's when you need a teacher. You know, that's like when you get into the fight. When you start to cultivate is when you start to fight with the mind of ignorance and attachment, with the mind of mindfulness and detachment, or, different names for different approaches.
What about Osho? Osho had like quite more, I guess, compared to Sadhguru, Osho was very, very like entertainment driven and quite controversial in his own way. I think Sadhguru's mentioned about Osho how he's sort of like the controversial, he was like the master of controversy. Do you think that it's a potentiality to be able to have the intention of generosity, cause sort of drama and so on, and then sneak in through the back door with some teachings? Is that a way of getting to people? Because it seems like the world is attracted to drama and conflict in a lot of ways. It feels like that's what the YouTube algorithm likes, and I feel like is there a space for that as well, though, somewhere maybe?
That's what Sadhguru said as well. He's thrown a big net out so that he can get to as many people as possible, and then the real ones come through that kind of net that he's thrown out. That's kind of what Osho did as well, really, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I've met a lot of deranged people who seem to think that Osho is great and say to follow him. Never met a particularly wise or lovely person who followed Osho very seriously and got some kind of freedom from it just by explicitly focusing on Osho and talking to other people about Osho. I also haven't seen anything. Osho didn't have success in terms of what he did, so his
Oh, I agree with
organization
that
fell
point.
apart.
I agree with you there,
His,
Bante. And I
his,
said the same thing to Shiva. But I do also think that he definitely had some, he's probably helped a few people along his way. He seemed like an enlightened being as well, and he had a lot of wisdom to give. But I agree with you when you're saying that the message sort of gets lost in translation because of the way that it
well, to
ended.
be
But
Yeah, it's just what his community became and what happened through all that. So it's difficult to see, like, to try to make use of that for a person who's trying to idealize Osho. Not that he's not enlightened, because Sadhguru has talked about him as well. But I think that most people need a living teacher. Most people need a relationship with a living teacher. So if you focus too much on someone who's already passed away, it's going to be really difficult.
Hmm.
Does the in like the Dhamma, is there ever stuff about like I know that there's this idea of kindness and truth and all of this. Is there ever like situations? I guess I think we maybe talked about this before, but I feel like sometimes you need to uh, kind of call out like like you should call out clinging or call out attachment. Like, is that unkind or is that kind?
It just usually doesn't do much. It's just like poking a wound with a stick. It just makes the wound more agitated. So we're trying to kind of de-agitate the wound.
is that what a guru always does? Always doesn't the guru sometimes um,
No. The guru has the
confuse?
different rule set. The guru has the different rule set, but that's because they went to the gym, they did the training, they've done this for years and years. They've gave up their entire lives for it. So they get the insight or the wisdom. They can have a different rule set. But we cannot. We as the normal people have to be really careful about, because we try to appropriate the wisdom of the teachers, and it leads us into a untenable place. And then that's why it's so important to get into the ring. So if you want to test your acuity or your ability, you have to go. You have to be with other spiritual seekers. You have to visit a Isha center or attend talks. You have to get involved.
I remember that there was a story about the Buddha, and he went to like a bar, and he or some spiritual teacher, and he went to a bar, and he started drinking, and all of his disciples were so confused. Um, and so then in the next town, they all went and they went into the bar and they drank, and then they went to the next town, and they all went together into the next town, and the teacher went into the blacksmith, and he took the molten hot lava, and he drank it all, and he was totally fine, obviously, because he's enlightened, right? So that um
Um,
so
Yeah.
like what like we have to walk the path, like you're saying. Like you can't just skip ahead, do nothing, and you're enlightened and you can, you know. But if you are like that, then the dualities kind of pass away.
That's Adi Shankara. That's a Sadhguru's story. Yeah, the
Oh yeah. Okay.
students realized that they can't do what he's doing, so they shouldn't have drank the alcohol in the first place.
It's good. Good story. It's a good story.
Yes. So Bante, when you say we have to practice good deeds, can you give us some examples? What are some simple things we can do?
Great question.
Well, you want to, I mean, if you're looking down the yogi path or the spiritual development path, you want to do good deeds concerned with the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, or the enlightened teacher, the teachings of that teacher, and the community around that teacher. So if you're looking towards Sadhguru as an enlightened being, you want to do good deeds more and more with mindfulness and detachment, meaning like you practice it as a yoga to release and relax as in the movement, and in the effort of the movement, you're releasing and relaxing. You're not constricting, right? So you want to do that more and more concerned with that community and that practice. Outside of that, it's just kind of like guidance for people on how to live their lives. So you want to be generous, you want to do good deeds, you want to help others so that you'll have blessings, because when you do good, you get good back. Um, you can volunteer, you can make donations, you can support in whatever way you can figure out. You have to go out of your way to try and support someone and support something meaningful and good, mainly based in generosity. And it's most people would like to get rid of their thoughts. And if they try to trade their thoughts with someone, they're not going to be valuable. And that's one of the big issues with people who try to start up, like, not just, it doesn't have anything to do with spirituality, but like mentoring channels or Adonis, Stigma, YouTube channels and things like that, or people that go to Twitch to stream on Twitch, for 20 hours a week to nobody. Their time is not valuable. So what they're doing is not really giving. They're not trying to give anything as much as they're trying to get something. So we have to identify our points of value. We have to give that. So your money is a point of value, right? Your possessions are a point of value. Your skilled time or your engaged time is valuable, right? And you give that or you offer that out. You offer that towards someone else. And at the beginning, you have to be very kind of humble and practical about that. You can't go say, I'm gonna strip down and walk in the streets nude because I'm a yogi and I'm gonna give my life to everyone. That's not gonna benefit anybody. And you're gonna hurt yourself in the process. So we just start small by making donate because also, for example, you can't really be in relationship with a spiritual person without donating to them or supporting them because they don't want anything from you, and there's no interpersonal element actually in that relationship. So the relationship has to be based in generosity. And if you're not practicing generosity towards that person or that institution or that group, then it doesn't make any sense what you're doing there. There's no basis for you or for that other person to engage with you. And we've got a really kind of reversed mindset in our culture or in our spiritual state where we go towards someone to ask a question, like we identify that that person may have wisdom or have something we want, and we immediately think that in us approaching them, they want something from us, like they're doing, like the person who's asking the question is doing a favor to the person who's being asked the question. And that's because our ego is so mixed up in pride, but not everyone is like that. And we don't always have to be like that.
We always kind of have like a taking kind of mindset as kind of what I was kind of.
Also add to that that the guru kind of wants you to reach the peak of what's possible. That's what they kind of want the most from you, rather than donations and things like that. They're doing it to get you out of the mind, out of the fakeness.
Yeah, so it's a lot of really interesting points and aspects about the spiritual path, and it's great that people are, getting more and more interested in it. Um, but we just, it's a shame if that interest isn't if that is interest isn't met on the other side. If you don't feel like you can be met according to how interested you are in it, then that's a wasted opportunity, because you may never get that interested in it again. Um,
Interested in what, sorry?
Yeah, I think that was powerful what you
giving
just said
your
there, Bante.
giving your life to the path, and a lot of the generosity or the giving or the doing good deeds or the like small self-sacrifice, right? Consider it small self-sacrifice. It's kind of like preparing you to be in a position to be useful, or to know how to use your body and mind on a spiritual path rather than on a stress-induced carrot on a stick path, right? So the spiritual path is that we learn to sit down and eat the carrot, but the money lifestyle is always, you're always chasing this carrot. So once you start eating the carrot, it's going to be very confusing, and it's going to make you kind of really crazy if you don't have so much ego, or if you don't have this relationship with practically giving up or letting go of what you're attached to now, in a way that doesn't trick you and doesn't coerce you. And it's surprisingly accessible and surprisingly difficult to do that. To find a way to go and make some donations or do some good things.
Hmm.
Because it's just like right now, if all you guys, or if everybody in this room wanted to come to India and train as monks, or help to build meditation center, that kind of thing. We can come do it, and you'll be fed and housed and da 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 da. Like, we'll work all of it out, and that's just the power of the spiritual community. That's the power of the sangha. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be intense. It's going to be difficult. But it's completely possible to do that. And in the world of the West, that's impossible. And if it were even remotely possible, you guys better bring a bunch of money with you. But it's not like that, actually. We'll feed you, we'll house you, we'll figure it all out. My teacher will be happy to have you guys there. And we'll just go from there, according to ability and need.
Bante, would you consider yourself enlightened?
No, because I'm not interested in considering myself. I'm interested in detaching from myself. Yeah.
So then do you have a definition of enlightenment?
To really be enlightened is to be um, based to a degree that is not intellectually comprehensible, and to be chill to a degree that doesn't depend on conditionality. So it's all about being based and chill. It's not about something more than that. So
Sorry, you said being based in chill?
enlightenment is all about being
Based,
based and
man.
chill. Yeah.
I love it. Nice.
I feel like this clinging kind of comes a lot, and so I feel like when my emotions kind of become light, then that kind of clinging kind of goes away, and it's more just everything is just more positive. Is there any do you have any insight on how you kind of I don't want to say attain that, but yeah, it's attain it. How do you attain that? Go for it. I'll just go for it
It's
and say
it's
that.
the it's the real deal, man. It's you have to get out there and give. You have to take your big ball of ego and pride and superiority and specialness, and you have to take that. Really, what we think is a big ball of gold is actually a big ball of shit that's very dense and heavy that we've got chained to our legs. And you've got to take your money, which is actually your merits or your blessings. It's merit or blessings because you have no. It doesn't matter how much money you have. You aren't guaranteed 5 minutes from now. That's also where we get into the enlightenment realm. So someone who gets more and more enlightened is less bound up or in a state of illusion related to time. You have there's no 5 minutes from now for you, literally, figuratively, physically, mentally, etc., etc. It's not that's not real at all. So the money that you have is just an access to merit, and then how you use that merit allows you to get more and more free. So you have to use that merit at the beginning to grab a hold of that big, dense ball of shit that you're chained to, and you have to go and throw yourself over to Isha Foundation or to whatever spiritual teacher or person will say, "Hey, okay, I'll try to help you out." But it's not just a relationship that we don't have with giving. It's certainly that, but it's not just that. It's also a relationship that we don't have with being helped. And it's a very deep fixation on being tricked. It's a very, very powerful attachment to being tricked and deceived. And that means that what we're usually helped by is tricksters and deceivers. And actually, wise people or compassionate people, we're afraid of them. We don't go towards them. We go away from them. And the reason that a place like Isha and other centers, to more or less extent, I mean, I'm really fond of Sadhguru, and I haven't been there yet, but I have a lot of faith in what he's doing. But the reason that there's a cost for that is, on one side, you have to have a system for wealthy people to give, so that you can benefit the poor people. And then you have to have a kind of a generosity blockade, which is already naturally there. So there's probably some more natural systems, I would say, that could be put into place so that there is more accessibility for just people who say, well, I'm ready to go, because that is important, I think. But there's tons and tons of people who've got a big ego in themselves, and they say, oh, I'm ready to do this, I'm ready to go. But they're not ready to be generous, they're not ready to let go. And a lot of times they're psychotic, or they're stuck in their psychoticness, and they think that this is the solution, which it very well may be. But so you have to have some blockade to make sure that, the people who come and train at your center are willing to give. And that's really what the money is about, you know. Because also, if you're a Westerner and you can't save up a couple $100 and then do the online course, well, then how are you going to come to India and become a new guru in the streets? It's not really going to work out. So it kind of has to be there in some way or another. If there were 1,000 Sadhgurus in Isha, then it probably you could have much less of that, but you have to have some of that. And it's also, and this is the difficulty part, it's also an openness to intensity, to vibrancy, to the wildness of the road and the path. It's not complacency. It's not, well, this feels a little bit intense. It's the more you get into it, the more intense it's going to feel, and the more freedom you'll have in the face of intensity, rather than being stuck or trapped in it.
I asked you a question, Bante, the last time when you first came in, and it seems like you're trying to hit on a specific topic here. And maybe I'm misreading the situation, I asked you a question. What do you think about Shiva's channel, and how you feel about it? And you said, I think it's great, and I think it's got good energy. But the vibe that I'm sort of getting a little bit now is that you're sort of indirectly trying to put some warning signs up a little bit, I think, just to give us some discernment towards who we're following. Would you say that I'm correct in saying this?
Um, from what I've seen with Shiva's channel, um, I think he's pretty level-headed and open in terms of being an introducer and being an inviter, and that's completely wonderful. That's completely fine. I mean, I haven't researched it extensively because I'm very busy with my teacher here, but there's nothing wrong with doing that. And it's really important that there are a lot of people who are doing that.
Okay, that's good. I like that.
No pressure, Shiva.
So, yeah, the intensity um, is really important because it kind of breaks up these blockages related to the importance that we give to um, like the points of grasping that we have inside of ourselves that define our psychology. So you have to get more and more open to that intensity so that you can. It's like with the heart, blockages in the heart, and then once you do the exercise or you do the sauna, the heart's beating very quick and the blood's hot, so it blows out all of those those clogs and those clumps that otherwise we would identify with. And when we don't have much intensity in our life, those clogs just they bind up the heart to such a degree that we can't really connect with each other, and we can't make much real progress in terms of wisdom, which is what as Westerners, that's what we want. We want wisdom. We don't want the feeling good because we already feel like we feel good enough or we have enough access to that. We want the wisdom. So you have to get into the intensity and not judge it, um, and not try to control it as much, as long as it's concerned with the right things. Because it's like if you get to a certain degree of intensity in a city or in around certain people, I mean, now you're in a lot of trouble. If you get in a lot of intensity concerned with the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, or the path, and you're around the right people, there's no trouble. There's no confusion about the truth or the nature or the way.
Mm-hmm.
And it and then we can get intense and we can do our best, and then we can calm down and continue. Um, there's not a lot of people that have this kind of access to insight that you will find with the guru, with the master, with whoever it is. And so there's no like safety net that's been put there for that at all, in terms of how we relate to that and in terms of how we're facilitated to connect with those things. So we have to take on an immense amount of responsibility to empower ourselves so that we can come back and we can do the work for Western people. I mean, I've done a lot of work online. I've talked to a lot of people. I've put myself out there a lot, and also in person. And I can tell you the amount of like realized or very experienced people that I've met, it's like 0.01% or something, 0.1%. Most people have basically are just don't have any real experience at all. Um,
Another interesting thing, just to add in there if I can as well, is something that Sadhguru says as well, just to think much less of yourself. Like, stop thinking you're the thoughts, the patterns, and the processes happening in this body-mind system, and actually have some kind of external perspective on it, like that bird's eye view on what's happening, and stop referring to it as you. Because when you refer to it as you, you're in the weeds, so to speak. You can't see it for what it is, the just the duality of thoughts and processes and stuff, and you get kind of bogged down in it. Even if you talk about yourself in the third person, sometimes it can give you perspective on what your mind's actually thinking and those patterns that might have come up. Like I've done CB, I used to be a CBT therapist a while back, and so you look at patterns of people's minds, and they don't notice that there's some deep-rooted patterns in there that are causing them to think and act the way they are. So if you can start to get a perspective on that from an outside view, you can start to stop looking at yourself as, this is happening to me and I'm this one person in here, and actually pull away from that a bit. Obviously, I do like Isha practices as well. So having that perspective where you can pull away and look at the system and the body mind helps a lot as well. Everyone
the
can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, cool.
The mental formations or the states of, let's call it psychosis or mania or intense, like psychological, we're hearing things, we're seeing things, we're experiencing things, it's mysterious, we don't know what's going on. This kind of thing is completely impermanent and temporary.
Mm, mhm.
There's no solid self, there's no solid entity that maintains or is binded by that or is dependent upon any of that. So, as much as we can have a relationship with the patience and detachment and the release, we will be free from all of that and it will lessen and lessen and lessen. It's just
Yeah,
because we identify with that and then perpetuate that, not only in terms
exactly.
of our thinking, but also in terms of how we live our lives, that becomes a serious situation like schizophrenia or psychosis or anxiety disorder, etc.
Yeah,
All that
yeah,
stuff is, you can't keep track of it. You can't even keep memory of it. It's just we don't know how to ungrasp, and we only have faith in ourselves and the dollar, and we're not willing to give up any of that. So then you create a system of being schizophrenic, or you create a system of being psychotic in whatever way, or ideas of grandeur, or ideas of negative aspects of the mind, or negative aspects of identity that aren't yours and never were yours.
yeah.
It's an identity that relates to the society, but we become so isolated and crunched in that now we can't actually do anything to help that situation or those people, and we just sink and drown in that.
Exactly that, exactly that. And so, and what Sadhguru says as well is stop believing you're something that you're not. That's the biggest crux of it, isn't it? You're believing you're this single individual in this big world out there. And that's why the perspective is, oh, I need to do this. I need to get this now. I need this quick hit, this quick win, all of those kind of things that become your patterns and your personality and the way you are, which then clouds everything of what you truly are at the core of that.
Yeah, you don't want to become hallucinatory. I think that's the main thing. You don't want to just be hallucinating reality and thinking that you're in a space of enlightenment or spiritual completion.
You're muted, Bante. You're muted.
Yeah, you're muted, buddy.
For sure. And so really it's just you want to check in about the degree of seriousness you are about the path. If it's I'm really serious about getting enlightened, in one way or another, you have to abandon many aspects of your life and you have to go towards an established institution of spiritual training. If you're not, if that's not, you're not open to that in even small bits and pieces, you're not interested in enlightenment. You just want to feel better, which is great. And the wisdom teachers or these schools of enlightenment, etc., are some of the best places, and a lot of the time to help you feel better. But you have to be willing to be humble enough to listen. That means you need to have an active relationship with generosity. Otherwise, you won't be in a plastic or an open enough space to listen. You'll always be bound up by your own thoughts and fixations. And that is to say that the world is never the way that we think that it is. And it's certainly not the way that we've been led to believe that it is with the movies and TV shows and American culture or whatever. That's just a view. And it has nothing to do with like real human potentiality or capacities to affect the world or to be affected by the world or any of that. That's why you can't really say that like the 5G conspiracy people and the people who are talking about spirits and stuff, you can't say all of that is completely wrong because the view of just like a materialistic, simplistic, animalistic view of reality is also, it's not really like that either.
I find it interesting that enlightenment, this idea of enlightenment, creates the illusion that there's something that we're going to pursue and attain eventually. We think we're going to
Mm-hmm.
get enlightened
It's
in
like the
some
biggest barrier
distant
for a lot of people
future.
as well, isn't it? Yeah. Like it's not your natural
Sorry?
state, and then there's something just clouding that.
You cannot get enlightened,
Yeah,
and
there is no you to get enlightened.
power is very true, but it never competes with wisdom. So you can become very powerful, but you have to train accordingly to become very powerful. And what have you done? What are you doing? And then we disrespect people who actually are doing something because we're frustrated within ourselves because we want power. Um, but it can't compete with wisdom. And then when you combine power with wisdom, that's when you have miraculous kind of activities of helping others and healing sicknesses within yourself mostly. But that can also extend outward. But
Mhm.
still, that's not in the realm of wisdom. It's just power. And that's also, we're seeking power and we think that power is in wisdom, but wisdom has nothing to do with power. Just that we may need a lot of power because of how blocked our heart is and how blocked our mind is from our culture and from our listen in human history, the way that not self is living, the way that Booker is living, the way that Shiva is living, the way that monk or Bante is living, only kings lived that way. And no, we don't have many wives, which is probably for the best because who's going to deal with that? You need to be a saint to deal with something like that. But hot water on demand, clean clothes, a house, access to a magical device that can, see people in different places. So you're not just a prince or a king, you're also a wizard. And that amount of power can be very confusing and cause a lot of knots and tangles inside of ourselves. But those knots and tangles are also greater and greater points of release. And the reason that the wealthy people are so ignorant and confused is because they're lost in the world of being a king and a wizard. I mean, how could you not be confused by that? We're also confused by that. We're just frustrated that they have more money or more power than us, seemingly. But it doesn't help with anything. Like I was saying earlier, it's like the money is just you can't even use it. You can't. I mean, once you have your basic necessities figured out, and you're kind of content. You're kind of content and regulated and all that. There's nothing to spend your money on. There's nothing to buy. There's nowhere to go. Even if you go somewhere, you're just trying to go to another version of where you're already at and maybe see some things that are a little bit different and do the same thing. So, that's also why the generosity is so important and why we work together is so important because otherwise it's just not a meaningful life. There's no meaning in it. And then you get these people that are very frustrated and upset and then their money they just throw it away because it seems like there's nothing else to do with it. And they get this wrong idea, which is really wrong, that everybody wants their money. There's so many people that actually don't care about money and don't need money to live. Doesn't mean that money's not useful.
She
And so
even wants
that's a
all the
big
money in the world.
it's a big Western problem that we Westerners have all this money, but they don't want to give. They're afraid or they're angry or they're delusional when it comes to giving, and it limits what we can do and what we can develop. For the spiritual masters, for my teacher, I'm sure for well, Sadhguru has India, so I don't think it's that big of an issue for him. Um, but for a lot of spiritual teachers, it's a definitely my teacher, it's a problem. And then it comes into the other side where we all want to be in charge or we all want to be in control. But if we can see that sexuality doesn't give us happiness or freedom, we can detach from sexuality at least a little bit. And if we can see that there's already enough resources to go around and that ultimately we can't even use all these resources to make us happier, we can detach from that a little bit. Then we can see that doing good deeds, working together, collaborating, cooperating, protecting, communicating is much more valuable than money or sex or resources and sexual experiences. Then there's no reason to compete with each other or to have this notion of like, well, he's in charge. He seems to know what he's talking about. He must be evil. We have to, figure out a way to overthrow him. It's very it's very primatism. It's like a primate psychology, and we actually don't need to rely on that as much as we think that we do. It's just we don't communicate enough to develop trust. We don't give enough to develop trust, and then we think that no one is trustworthy. But it's not about being perfectly trustworthy. It's just can you, to the best of your abilities through communication and giving, trust that person. And if you can, you have to trust that. Otherwise, you can't trust anything. You can't trust your own gut. You can't trust your own heart because you're not open to that. The only thing that you can trust is your complicated thinking. And that's where you'll spend the rest of your life in complicated thinking, or in the realm that you're affiliated with according to your past lives and the karmas or past experiences and the actions that have been taken in them. But the past lives teaching is very important because it emphasizes in a way that you can grasp that it's not this one solid self that has been around. So those past actions or past experiences are not actually representative of a past solid self that now relates to you. But you can't say that's completely not you, but you also can't say that's you. And that's tuning more into our direct experience and tuning into more of our heart wisdom, our gut wisdom, etc.
So, what kind of recommendation would you make to a Westerner? Should you suggest that we should move to Tibet or some sort of a Eastern civilization and wear robes and not earn any money, or what do you think? What's your
Let's make as much
perspective?
money as we can. Let's make as much money as we can. I mean, that's great. Let's build the best place in in the so there's certain countries. See, this is also the thing, is that we've been relegated to this movie world, this TV show world, this apartment world of living in Boston or in Atlanta or whatever it is, and that just doesn't have anything to do with the world. So for example, concerned with spirituality, spiritual life in America, you can do freely. So you can build freely, you can do freely all kinds of good deeds limitlessly. I don't want to live in America, but you can, right? But it's very expensive and most people don't give. The people are very selfish, and also the culture in America is not conducive to spiritual life, just the mindset that people in general have. In Vietnam, there's tons of people who like to give, and the environment is very conducive to spiritual life. You can do quite a bit, but you can't do too much. You have to be quite discreet. In a country like Myanmar, you also can do freely, and there's a lot of people that will support and be interested, but there's not a lot of money in Myanmar, and the conditions as they are difficult. And India is a good place, a good example as well. You can do freely there. There's a lot of people who want to support, but it's going to be intense and difficult to go into that environment and start building because of the weather, because of the difference in culture is very deep and intense. So it's more of a willingness for us to realize that the way that we grew up, the culture and condition that we grew up in was one of neglect, abuse, and a false imposition of scarcity. And so we carry that with us. We were neglected, we were largely abused, and we were told that there was scarcity when there was not. And that means that you're
Sorry for
basically
leaving. My phone died.
you're, you're basically a child in the forest, wandering around, and you don't know what to do. And so the best that you can do is try to listen and follow. But that big burly man wearing a bear coat, the skin of a bear, walking through the forest with jugs of water and food, and seems to know where he's going and what he's doing, has no interest in convincing you of anything. And your remarks or your opinion or position is just that of a child lost alone in the forest to a great degree. Sometimes we use extremism to point to a principle that maybe we're not making use of, right? So the best thing that you can do is just try to follow and support. There's no guarantee that that person is going to respond to you when you speak, but it doesn't mean that they won't let you follow them or that they won't let you do what you can to support. And then as time goes by, you may seem to be more reliable, and then there's more opportunity for communication, right? But it's once again, when it comes to the mind and how privileged we are and how much access to resources or money or power we seem to have, it's very much like we we think we are more powerful than we are. And the moment that we get into the gym, the moment that we I'll tell you a story. I'll tell you a story about this. There's a guy. I think he has a Discord server, and he's been very vocal online about like his enlightenment and his position and how high it is and how high his experience is, and he's convincing some people about it. And anyway, he reached out to me, and I was able to get be open enough to him for him to come and try and listen to something, and he thought he was completely free, completely enlightened, completely blown out of his mind in terms of realization and development, right? So he he got to a point to go to visit India. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to go to India. I'm going to enlighten the people. I'm going to bring up the message that, no doubt, my friend." He got to India and he hightailed himself back to his country, in the Nordic area or whatever, the day after. And this is a guy who's really, really, really confident. So all of us are kind of in that position to one degree or another. That's why it's so important that we give ourselves up, we go forward, we take refuge, concerned with, you know, wisdom and a community as far as we can know. It's as scary as it is. Birth and death are much scarier, and that is precisely what we are choosing to encounter when we invoke the intention to go on the spiritual path. And we have to practice fearlessness as much as we practice anything else, you know. But because we can't trust it, we're very limited, and it's a cultural thing. So it just according to my blessings and my merits that I had enough faith and I had enough trust to go and take refuge in the Sangha in Thailand in 2018 on my own 2 feet when I did. There was no plan. I didn't know what monastic life was. I didn't know where I was going to go. I just knew that that was a Buddhist country, that I had experience with Buddhism and meditation, very intense, serious experience. So I went there and I knocked on the doors of the monks and I said, "Hey, I want to be a monk. I need help." I didn't say I'm here to help. I didn't say, "Oh, I've got this special experience." I was desperate. Now, I need much less help, but I still need a lot of help, or I see the benefit in getting help from people who are more experienced than us and more developed than us, which there are for sure.
So I'm still not fully clear on what your overarching point is. Are you saying that we would benefit from going to the East and learning in sort of from yogis, from monks in more Eastern spiritual traditions and getting out of the West?
You can, yeah, I mean, you can come to India next month. I'll make it a priority as much as I can to make sure that you're ready. But it's not going to be what you want. And that's also it's like disaster. Like it's like going on a vacation to a place that you don't want to go. Who can do that? Right? Who the heck can do that? But that's what you have to kind of want to do, is go to a vacation to serve and to give where you don't want to
Okay,
go.
how much money are you asking for? That's probably the most important question.
Well, you will have to, I mean, maybe $1 billion or more would be a good place to start for like our group's work. But in terms of asking from you, you've got to pay money for the visa. And you'll have to get a flight ticket out there, and you'll definitely want to have some dollars in your pocket when you go to India. I don't need anything from you. I
I
don't need
think
anything from
I think
anybody.
Callum, what Callum's your angle is sort of you think that Bante is trying. I think Bante is only saying that's if this is something that you're interested in seeking out. He's not like trying to convince anybody that's not spiritually inclined like yourself to go over to India and join his movement. He's just trying to speak to the real, true spiritual seekers in the call and see if anybody is interested in that. Then that would be the path, the best path to take. I think that's what he's trying to say.
Because there also are not a lot of opportunities. So there's Isha, there's my teacher's movement or group, and my teacher's movement or group is very open, like completely open to providing for people, etc. Um, but there's not a lot of opportunities out there for doing something like this, for giving yourself to the path.
No, I wasn't trying to be disrespectful or suggest that you were trying to get money off of people. I understand what you're doing and I respect it. Money is obviously an important thing. You need money for everything.
Well, as a monk, you don't need money for anything, because we take refuge in the sangha, or we take refuge same with monks at Isha, even though it's not easy to become a monk at Isha. um, well, you can't you can't run you can't
I
run
think
away from life.
he's talking more about giving away money because he's talking about feeding people and all this.
Yeah,
He's
it's
not
more
talking about
about
like
giving
what.
away.
Yeah.
It's definitely more about giving than it is about getting anything. And as a
Who was
monk,
that guy that just said Shiva's truly enlightened? Who was that? The little fool.
well, we're all fully enlightened in terms of not being someone, because you can't be someone, or you can't be separate from everything else. And that's, I think Sadhguru was saying when he went back to Isha in India recently, that that this is empty and this is all because of them now. That he is all because of them now, and it's kind of a recognition of the collective enlightenment of not being someone anymore. So it's not it's not from him. That's more just kind of spreading the broad net, because some people cannot understand that, and some people have to have faith in a certain teacher and their personal enlightenment to, to feel comfortable to go further down the path.
I think the concept of enlightenment is probably inimical to a lot of people's progression down the spiritual path. I don't even like the term spiritual path because it doesn't really mean anything. A lot of people have different perspectives on it. I think the goal should be to discipline yourself, to become a moral person, to live a moral life, and to intellectually elevate yourself to a certain degree. But the idea of enlightenment, like if you wake up every day and you do certain spinal movements, then what's gonna happen? It's kind of like chasing a magic dragon.
But it is good to stretch. I mean, if you can wake up every morning and do some yoga, you're probably gonna feel a lot better.
Yo, I want to chase a magic dragon.
Mushrooms, DMT.
No. That stuff. They do say that the DMT, especially the ayahuasca, is the most reliable in terms of spiritual help or support. But you have to be in a context, and you have to have the supportive structures for working with all that energy because the mind is, as complex and deep as the universe. So if you just dive into there without support, it's you're likely to get yourself into a bit of confusion. Because in the world of spirituality, like kindness is the only option, generosity is the only option, forgiveness, gentleness, compassion is the only option. There's no other option. Well, may
That's a good
God.
point. That's a good point, Bonte. What do you think about that?
God is easy to understand, Buddha or Enlightenment or whatever the name is in Hinduism, whatever name Sadhguru might use for it.
Parabram.
Difficult to understand.
Hold on, who's talking? Can we give them the microphone for a minute? I'm kind of curious about what they're saying.
Good luck. I mean, a lot of people, because of my work online and just because of how much I've put myself out there, in a generally, not too wild way. I mean, of course, it can always be
Bonte is
better, but
the magic dragon we need to slay.
a lot of people have,
I'm just
tried to
kidding, by
like
the way. I'm just kidding.
interfere with my work and my life as a monk, but really it's just so far from Western access. There's not really anything that any Western person can do from a place of anger, greed, delusion that can interfere with, my life as a monk outside of like showing up somewhere and killing me or something. In terms of the institutions, because it is an ancient institution of spirituality that has no like dependence upon Western influence.
We have magic, witchcraft.
Kindness is a kind of, but we wouldn't want to kill kindness.
Satan.
Your mic's really, really bad, Magnus. I'm not sure if you need to like sort it out or something. But did you say something about kindness is witchcraft, or am I just literally hallucinating things here?
Yeah, he said that.
You did say that.
Manipulation. He's manipulating you.
Magus, take the floor for a little
Magus,
bit and
yeah,
elaborate. Let him
enlighten us.
talk.
What is the truth? What is
The truth is one. Both dark and light is one. There is
Sounds like
no
semantics.
separation. There is no separation.
Oh wow, thank you. I would have never guessed.
Yeah, I'm sure Bante doesn't know that.
Thank you for this
But
enlightenment.
it's the blessing of putting yourself out there in adversity and difficult situations where you get to realize that like thoughts and mental formations are not as important as they seem to be. You know, like I had this, you had that thought, I had this thought. Okay, well, how is the mango tree doing? How's the human ore pile? How's the water? Right? Is there anybody nearby that needs a little bit of help? And then the thoughts that we have about ourselves, especially, are just vapid and not kind of important. And that's such a blessing, especially for me. I mean, if I was just worked up about my thoughts, it'd be very difficult for me to care about other people and to put myself out there because I'd be afraid of what other people thought about
Do
me or
you not have an ego?
I'd be dominated by thinking.
Do you have an ego?
Some questions I don't have an answer for yet, but a lot of answers are actually how we live our lives, you know, because you'll be answering all kinds of questions with each step that you take, with each breath that you breathe. And if you're a Buddha, if you're a Buddha, you can answer any question and enlighten other people. Like you can pull analogies out of thin air that directly reach people according to their karmic understanding and affinities and just blow them out of the water. Not in terms of defeating them, but in terms of like opening their hearts and minds. So that's
Because you're doing that right now.
like a Buddha.
So what about war?
Uh, war is not. War is one of the things we're allowed to talk about. That's very negative and scary. And there's a lot of things we're allowed to talk,
So
not
why do
allowed to
you
talk.
run? You don't accept reality. You do not accept reality. You run.
I think a good way to have the conversation is just like you can. I'm all here for you, Magnus, but you being slightly aggressive. I maybe just like trying to tone it down and just have a little bit of respect for the people that you're talking to.
Maybe turn on your camera and
There are, see, Megas, there are philosophers who have this same kind of enlightenment things, and they know that there are wars, and they know there are certain paths where it leads to violence, and they're not scared of. All
Yeah,
covered, don't worry.
for me right now, what it
You're
seems like,
all
Magnus, I'm going to be
cowards.
honest. It seems like you're
You're
stuck
all
in a.
cowards.
It seems like you're
You're
Magnus, in like a hateful psychological thought pattern where you're blaming external circumstances and you're seeing the problems and the pain and suffering that's going on in the world and you're trying to
no.
find
It's
some
all
way to point a
one.
finger at it.
It's all.
He's gone.
Well,
yeah.
you can't really run, you know. I mean, it's life for your experience. You know, this is your experience, and don't try to run from it. Try to be with it, and try to be with it in a way of generosity and caring about other people and helping others. Um, you know, and it takes a lot of time to build up a different approach to life that's completely different from what Daniel Craig and what um, Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks and Tom Hiddleston. Who are all these Toms? Who's Tom? But you know, it takes a little bit of time to build that up, and so you don't have to try and force it because it's a matter of the heart, not a matter of what you think or what you do physically. It's a matter of your heart, and it takes a little bit of time. But you should be open to those feelings more so than you are about the thoughts about those feelings.
What
Because
are
the deeper you go into the mind, the less it is about thoughts.
what are the things that you're not allowed to talk about?
He's a monk. I don't think he would talk about that.
Different systems have different approaches. So, like for example, in the Tibetan system, a lot of the Zen or the Dzogchen ultimate nature teachings would never be talked about with regular people. Like they would never be given access to those thoughts because they can lead to a total lack of access to practical development. Um, so I don't follow that so much. I'm still learning like what I feel that is appropriate to talk about and what's not appropriate to talk about. But in terms of culturally, like there's a lot of aspects of our culture that we're not allowed to speak openly about, like things that are going on, how money is being used, like even asking someone else how much money they have and what they're using it for is completely taboo. But what there's not inherently a need for that to be taboo. It's just the cultural system that says that that's not appropriate, and it's a cultural system that keeps us separate from each other and keeps us from working together. Yeah, in some sense it's protective, but mostly it restricts our way of being together and our way of interacting with one another,
What
and for good reason too in certain situations.
what Buddhist tradition were you initiated into? Theravada, Mahayana, Zen.
This is a difficult question to answer, but the there's three basic aspects of positions in the Buddhist path. So there's a donor, a follower, a supporter, which allows the monks to be able to live. Then there's ordaining as a monk. So to ordain as a monk, you just need to go to a monastery where the monks accept you, and then they'll do the ceremonial, they'll do the ritual to give you the robes, to give you the starting point, and then they'll train you about how to carry yourself. And then you have the Arya Sangha, or the people who have entered into the stream of enlightenment. And that's some systems work in it in different ways, but it's kind of like 4 stages depending on the tradition. And then Zen has like no stages, kind of, but it's still inclusive of the other stages. And then the Theravada just has the 4 stages. And then the Mahayana has a kind of a whole nother lattice related to social work. So it's like the first 4 stages are just to be able to consider about the minds of other people in terms of your enlightenment. So then there's stages of capacity to interact with other people based on enlightenment rather than based on grasping or ignorance and attachment. And then Buddhahood is always the highest stage, which I was talking about a little bit earlier in terms of being able to teach anyone or help anyone. And then yeah, so those are the three main things. So I've been initiated into monastic life, and I've received transmission or support to authorization to teach and things like that by monks in different traditions. But it's not really sectarian in any way. It's not the way that it's thought about in any way, and that's
Understood.
very difficult to understand. It's like because it's like if you
Um,
unless you go
yeah,
and have
we just had a question
experience.
that,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. So do you know anything related to Vajrayana? There's also
A
this
little
sect called
bit.
Vajrayana, no? Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. And it's still the same basic premise. They just have a little bit more emphasis on like energy bodies and esoteric practices, like working with deities and working also with realms and things like that. But it's still boilerplate Buddhism when it comes down to it. The
Yeah.
top is still the top and the bottom is still the bottom.
Yeah. So in Vajrayana as well, you get Buddha at the top, and all the deities are basically lower than Buddha, right?
Yeah.
You
And
basically
different forms of the Buddha. They also emphasize different forms of the Buddha, like the medicine Buddha, primordial
Mhm.
Buddha, and things like that.
Buddhism's atheist, am I correct?
Yeah,
Would you
it's
say
more
that,
atheist than atheism is.
yeah, would you say that nihilism is an element of Buddhism?
No, because nihilism is it's the same problem of thinking that detachment has something to do with rejecting things. So it doesn't have anything to do with like avoiding something or trying to get rid of something. It's just not being attached to what's there. And then the principles of nature are allowed to take place. So everything is impermanent. Everything is temporary. Only impermanence is not temporary. And then you get into the realm of contradiction. Then you get into Nagarjuna's four statements or four rejections, which are um, and this is where you get into a lot of problems with understanding things that you don't have experience with. So that's four negations, Nagarjuna, and sec. I'm not a memory monk. Nagarjuna is very simple. So yeah, it's that's a weird one to use. Four negations. Uh, not okay. Here it is. Not real or not true. So not true, not false, not both true or false, and not neither true or false. And then you can look at it in terms of not one, not many, not both one and many, not neither one or many. Um, and it kind of answers a lot of the grasping and attachment concerned with points.
Do you see
So as
much
much as
right?
like as much as I can say, just in a completely practical or literal sense, as much as I can say that I am a monk, I could, it would also be just as true to say that I'm not a monk, that I'm not both a monk or not a monk, and that I'm not neither a monk nor not a monk. So it really isn't accessible to the intellect. And that's why instead of intellect, you have to rely on direct experience just because that's more practical. And then the practical path of that is then to be beyond grasping onto the notion of a self, onto the notion of something that's permanent, and onto the notion that any answer or anything is going to be satisfactory, that there's no satisfactoriness in grasping
So
or
these are
attachment.
koans. These are koans, correct? Where you try to sort of tire out the intellectual mind.
It can be viewed that way, yeah, could be used that way. And it is dangerous as well. That's another thing that people have to be aware of is that ideally there'd be a warning label because it's like taking ayahuasca or it's like taking, some strong psychedelic or something. Yeah, you might be in for a great positive heart healing ride, but it's ideally going to be something that you can't go backwards from. So that you can't go back to your normal way of life. You have to transition to a way of life that's more in line with your direct experience. How I hold that in terms of being open and sharing a lot is that there's so many people who are going through so much suffering and ending their own life and doing all these kinds of really horrible things to themselves or others. So it's like as much as we can take the bitter medicine, we can be a force of healing and a force of not going down that path and helping others to not go down that path.
So you just mentioned Nagarjuna. So you have studied about Shunyavad.
I don't know what that is.
Okay. So it's Nagarjuna's philosophy. He basically defended this philosophy of Shunyavad, that universe is unreal and all, which was basically stemmed from the Advaita Vedanta philosophy of India. So do you know anything regarding that?
This is something I'm looking at. This is something I'm working on. it can get a little bit disconcerting, but it is true that this is the way that it already is. So regardless of you being here or not being here, regardless of the earth being here or not being here, this is the way that it already is. And the earth being here or not being here, or the way that the earth is here, it still already is this way. It's not about some particular thing in it. And it is not a thing in this, which is also nothing. Um, so maybe you get into this notion of like degrees of nothingness, which is kind of silly. So it's more, for me, what I understand, it's more about the practicality of helping oneself and helping others without attaching to anything.
Hi everyone. I'm just going to say a word or two on this nice lady's mention of shunyata in contrast to nirvishesh. These are both
I have to use the
ancient Sanskrit
restroom. Please excuse
terminologies.
me.
These are both ancient Sanskrit terminologies that are also used in Buddhism. The difference is primarily with Vedanta versus these appearingly, seemingly impersonal, as some declare. Basically, there's a difference in one declares that there is divine substance that is not really a thing in the material sense of it. In other words, not made of earth, fire, water, air, ether, mind, intelligence, or ego, but it is a divine substance that is beyond and permeates everywhere. So that is a key difference with what Vedanta brings to the table, as in response, as an antithesis actually to Buddhism's general declarations of absolute no thingism. Simple terminology: nirvana. Nir means without. Vana means forestation, variegatedness, variety. So nirvana in itself suggests absolutely no variegatedness and no thing. Nirvishesh. And shunyata means absolute emptiness, like a black hole, and that is declared as the actual reality. Just a few words for you all.
Nice.
Nice. I'll tell you what as well. I've just got something to say. I've just got there's an elephant in the room, and it's in a little chat on the right hand side, and he's called Magnus969. What I would say, brother, is this: if you've got something to say, be a man, put your camera on, stop being a little boy and hiding behind this little invisible screen you've got, and say what you've got to say to us all to our face, and we can iron it out. You're full of hate. You're full of nonsense. You don't know what the you're talking about. And if we want to do it, let's go, brother. But turn your camera on and stop cowering behind your shite mic and your little invisible keyboard. Turn your camera on and have a conversation. Otherwise, leave the call, because all you're adding to your existence in your world right now is just awful, disgusting energy. Everything that you're saying there is shit that I thought about when I was 13, 14 years of age. You're juvenile in your thinking. So turn your camera on. How about that?
I mean, he's not even in the call, so he can't
Is he
really.
not? There he is. He's there. I can see him. He's right there in the call.
Oh,
Magnus
yeah, he
nine
is.
six nine. Yeah, he is. He entered the call again.
Oh, he's just left again.
Good.
Oh well. Yeah, leave the guy. He's people like that, don't give them attention. He's probably suffering in his own ways. Don't be getting in
I
mad at
know, man.
him.
But when you've got like a monk that's joining the call and stuff, and like, do you know what I mean? Like, you gotta just show, you've got to mediate the space a little bit. You don't just want this guy.
Yeah, yeah, true.
It's a bit rude, man. Do you know what I mean? It's like fair, have points, have controversial topics. I love that shit. But just be the way that you approach them should be in a way of. He's left now anyway, so there's no point in even going on about it. Welcome back, Bante.
Oh.
We're in the mix. We're getting like a full inside scoop right now. Amazing.
We're sitting with them. Nice.
Exactly.
So does that mean none of us are allowed to talk, or how's this work?
No. You
No, no, he is muted.
do what we gotta do, man. Interesting turn of events, interesting energy. It's good to have a big full firm here. I've never been in a call this big in Shiva's Discord before, and it's been an interesting little energy exchange.
So I've got a bit of a broad question, which I think everyone's going to have a relatively unique answer for. How do you rationalize evil and suffering in the world from a spiritual perspective?
Great question. I think for me, spirituality started through deep suffering and being exposed to true evil in the world. I think that most people, there's two types of spiritual people: people who are just living in fairyland, and there's people that have truly gone through some serious pains and needed a way out. You can rationalize it all you want. I feel like there isn't really any way to rationalize it. All you can do is heal your own inner world. And that's why this Magnus guy, where he's saying you're running away from reality, like he's not got a single clue about how most people, true spiritual seekers, get into it. We sit every single day with our pains, with our own evil, with our own demons, and we confront it every single day. That's what it's all about. How do I rationalize it? I think that's like the mind's trying to make sense of something that it can't really make sense of. Like, there is evil in the world, there is good in the world. You can't really have one without the other. You wouldn't know hot without cold. You wouldn't know light without darkness. We live in a world of duality. In a world of duality, this is the reason for spirituality, is to transcend the dual nature of reality, because that's why you become an aesthetic, and you don't overindulge in pleasure, because we're trying to escape the suffering and the evil in the world, or we're trying to transcend it. So I'm not going to sit here and try and say, why does a baby get syphilis, or why do people get murdered, or why do terrible things happen in the world? Why did my mum try and kill herself when I was 8 years old? Who knows, brother? But all I know is I felt a bliss of reality, and there is a spiritual dimension that includes both the evil and the beauty, and that's what Shiva is a figure of both these things together. So I think like it's like a good question, but I think it's a question that I asked so many times for so long, and the answer comes from transcending the question.
Sorry, can
He
I just
spoke
over
from
here
a
quickly?
yeah.
I was just wondering, A in this? How do you say your name? I was just wondering what your name means.
Nias.
Aeneas. What does that mean?
Praise or praiseworthy.
What do you think, Callum? What do you think? How do you reconcile the evil in the world, or what do you think the reason for it is?
Well, I think you have to get away from the conceptualization of God in sort of the personified form that Christianity puts God as, which is Yahweh, which is just a God of the past that got turned into this monotheistic deity. But when you turn God into this human with all of these human characteristics, it's impossible to then rationalize why the world is so corrupt, because then God must be evil. But then if you put Satan in the picture, but then you've got to explain God then created Satan, so any evil that Satan does is an extension of God. And it doesn't really make sense, but if you look at it from Egyptian or Hindu or Vedic mythology, for example, God's not really it doesn't have personality characteristics, it doesn't have suffering. It's Noon or Vishnu, and then mind came out of that and the cosmos was formed. But it has nothing to do with morals or anything. I think the reason for suffering is largely due to a lack of consciousness. So in nature, you have this evolutionary process which is caused by these two polarities, good and evil, light and dark, whatever. And it's kind of like samsara in Buddhism. And it's just a wheel that goes around, and energy comes into existence, and then it dies and turns into another form, and it conduces to the process of evolution. And throughout that process, sentient beings suffer naturally. So yeah, I think suffering can be rationalized in the world. I think the endeavor of most spiritual teachings is to transcend nature, to transcend suffering, to kind of elevate yourself to a degree where you're not driven by human animalistic impulses. That's sort of the whole goal of it.
Yeah, see, suffering in that sense really shouldn't matter to you, because suffering generally stems from your five senses, right? You touch, feel, and all those things. So whatever you basically sense from your these five organs is temporary in nature. So suffering is temporary in nature. So which is not constant, is not real for my philosophy. So which is Advaita Vedanta. And for us, God is not only Vishnu, Shiva, and Ma Parvati, all that. God is Parabrahm, the Sachidanand Swarup of God. If you know anything, let me know about that. What is the concept of moksha or Parabrahm or Sachidanand Swarup? So it's basically the Nirakar God, which is basically who doesn't have any form or doesn't look any certain way or doesn't have any characteristics to explain it. We cannot even explain what that is by our limited vocabulary, be it any language, be it even Sanskrit. It's Nirakar Nirgun Brahm, means who from whom every kind of form is formed, from whom every kind of gun means every rajas sattam, all kind of guns are formed from him or her. We don't know what it is. And as far as your concept of evil, evil in nature, like Abrahamic religions, doesn't exist. See, if you look at it that way, that there's evil, then God created something good and something evil. So evil things have a nature of being evil itself. They are not ever going to come back. But in Hinduism, you will see that most evil things also are sadhakas, most evil beings. They also worship God. They also do yoga in our theologies itself. They also worship God. Even
Yeah.
for, let's say, if you look at Shiva, the Shambho, not this Shiva, the upper one, the one with the Trishul and all that. He himself is portrayed as a destroyer. So, destroyer in any theology would be considered a evil thing. But destruction is very needed to restart a world, restart a creation. So, for us, there's nothing called as evil in the sense. It's just your acts at a certain point. And for balancing out those evil and right doings, you would get the karmic concept in that fold.
All right. Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the end of the video.
Alrighty.
I hope you enjoyed. Stay blessed.
What is Reese laughing at?
Agus, you don't even have a permanent internet connection? Why can't you just open your mic? I'm not going to type anything for you, dude.
Yes. Okay.
All right, guys. That's up.
Stay blessed. See you next time.